Okay, good evening. I'm so happy to see you all here. My name is Beandrea July. I'm a film programmer here at the Archive, and welcome to the Wilder Theater. It's an honor to welcome you to tonight's screening of Disclosure, a groundbreaking documentary by director Sam Feder, producer Amy Scholder, and executive producer Laverne Cox. Tonight is the first night in a series of 6 nights entitled Disclosure, a trans rereading of American cinema. And we have assembled an amazing panel for a Q&A after the film, so I really hope you will stay. We have the editor of the documentary, Stacy Goldate. Yay! And as well as 2 of the featured interviewees, creative consultants on the film, Tre'vell Anderson and Jen Richards. And I need to let you know that tonight's free screening, along with all of our year-round public programming, is generously supported by an anonymous donor and our partners here at the Hammer Museum. So we thank them. Love you guys clapping for the anonymous donor. And special thanks to our community partner, Queer Film LA. It's a great partner who has worked with us on a number of screenings. I also want to thank the archive staff, without whom truly none of these programs would be possible. And in particular, our theater manager, Lauren Brown, our projectionist, Alex Blevins in the booth, as well as our student theater staff that are here tonight. So let's give them a round of applause, yes. Also, you're welcome to take pictures, video of the remarks before and after the screening, but please refrain from doing that during the film. We also invite you to tag the archive at our handle, which is UCLA FTV Archive. And that's on all social media. And if you like, you can also hashtag disclosuredoc. So feel free to share, post, just not during the film. You can also go to cinema.ucla.edu to sign up for our email newsletter to learn more about this series and all of our upcoming programs. And now I would like to introduce the producer of Disclosure, Amy Scholder. Amy's most recent documentary project is Heightened Scrutiny, her latest collaboration with Disclosure director Sam Feder. The film just premiered at Sundance. I saw it, it was amazing. And it follows ACLU attorney Chase Strangio, who you've probably heard of, as he becomes the first openly trans person to argue before the Supreme Court. It also examines how mainstream media fuels anti-trans legislation and endangers lives and threatens democracy. For the past 20 years, Amy has been a leader in independent publishing and LGBTQ plus activism. I want to welcome Amy to the stage.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Beandrea, so much. I just want to thank UCLA Film and Television Archive. It is such an honor for the Disclosure Archive to be part of the collection in May. Thank you. It would not have happened without you. It's a huge honor. I wish Sam were here. Sam wishes he were here. To thank you and to say hello to all of you this evening. Sam and I started making Disclosure in 2014. What a different time it feels like that was then, when the rise of trans visibility seemed very exciting, but also seemed to promise to bring a backlash. It seemed to come out of nowhere. We didn't understand the context or the history, so we set out to make a small piece of that context and history by looking at film and television and the history of trans representation there. And to really think about how, and how we could really kind of like stave off a backlash, and if we could, and obviously we can't, and here we are. I think it's just, worse than any of us really could have imagined, and hard to stand here without anything but real sorrow and fear. At the same time, I look back at the time that we spent making Disclosure. It was like 5 years. before we premiered at Sundance. It was such a joy to make, in large part because of the participants in that film and the crew on that film. And I really want to just take a moment to thank, in particular, Tre'vell and Jen and Stacy. You had such a huge impact on how this film was made and the impact that it had. And I'm so proud of the film as a result. And I thank you, and thank you for being here tonight. And I just want to say, finally, we made the film thinking that we would be watching it in community across the country. And instead, after the premiere in 2020 at Sundance, everything shut down because of COVID, and in-person screenings were very rare, and this is rare. So it's so gratifying to me that you came out, though the film has been on Netflix for 5 years, but that you wanted to sit in a theater with us. I just thank each and every one of you for being here, and I look forward to the conversation afterwards. And again, thank you again for having us.
Thank you so much, Amy. I want to just give some context about the documentary to Amy's point about, the backlash and the time that we're living in. Deep breath. I also want to just mention and thank Amy and Sam for donating, for allowing their collection to be part of the archive and the library's special collection. So in 2022, UCL Library was honored to acquire the collection of Disclosure, which is made up of physical and digital materials related to the production and release of Disclosure. These materials include production files, research, dozens of production interviews, provide insight into the process of the film development, financing, and distribution. Among them are research interviews conducted in 2015 and 2016, interviews that are not featured in the final film but serve as essential primary resources. At the time, there was little to no comprehensive research on transgender representation in the media, so making these interviews is a crucial foundation for the film. You can visit the collection tab on the archive's website, cinema.ucla.edu, to learn more about the special collections materials. So thank you again for that, Amy and Sam. I want to move to giving some direct context for the film, starting off with just a few stats. So approximately 1.3 million adults in the U.S. identify as transgender. That's just 0.5% of the population. Yet in the 2024 election cycle alone, over $215 million was spent on television ads attacking trans rights, more than $100 per actual trans adult. This staggering statistic, which is reported by UCLA's Law School's William Institute, underscores the urgency of conversations like the one we're having tonight. The filmmaking team of Disclosure highlights the paradox at the heart of the film with this quote: "We all need to be seen, and often being seen is what puts marginalized people in harm's way." It is that paradox of visibility that inspired us to make Disclosure. By analyzing over 100 years of film and television history through the perspectives of trans creatives, including our panelists tonight, Jen Richards and Tre'vell Anderson, Disclosure is both a reclamation and a refutation of trans erasure. It invites us to reconsider the images we have all absorbed over time, how they've shaped us, and how they continue to influence societal attitudes today. The entire screening series named after tonight's documentary features 6 films cited in Disclosure, plus 6 short films centering trans characters spanning from the 1800s to the present day. So I hope you will come back for other aspects of this series. The program is an opportunity not to just critique history, but to reread it, to examine these images through an intentional lens in real time by watching, listening, and reflecting. I had the privilege of attending the Disclosure premiere at Sundance in 2020 and reviewing it at the time for The Hollywood Reporter. In my review, I wrote, "It is easy to laud Disclosure for its trans representation in a world that systematically excludes trans people," and leave it at that. but attention must also be paid to how the doc offers innovative and entertaining storytelling with a lasting emotional effect. So I hope tonight's screening and the conversation that follows provides that lasting emotional effect for all of us. And just to give you, people who know me know I love to say the runtime because I understand folks have to use the bathroom. Disclosure's runtime is 1 hour and 48 minutes. And I also want to ask you to take a moment to silence and put away any devices that emit light. We can see your phone even if we don't think we can. And I look forward to seeing you afterward for the Q&A discussion. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the film. Give it up for Disclosure one more time. I want to read a little bit about the bios of the folks who are going to be in our panel and call them up. So let's start with the wonderful editor of this film, Stacy Goldate. Stacy is an award-winning editor, producer, and director who has edited 50-plus nonfiction projects, including CNN's The 90s and, of course, Disclosure, for which she was nominated for a Best Editing Award by the International Documentary Association. And next up is Tre'vell Anderson, they, them. Tre'vell is an award-winning journalist, podcast host, and authoress of the book We See Each Other, which I highly recommend, especially the audiobook. A Black trans journey through TV and film. They were named to Out Magazine's Out 100 and The Roots 100 Most Influential African Americans. Tre'vell is a sought-after commentator and cultural critic. Welcome, Tre'vell. And next up we have Jen Richards. Jen is an Emmy-nominated actress, writer, and trans activist. She starred in Mrs. Fletcher from HBO, Tales of the City on Netflix, and played Julia Lawson in Clarice, a CBS show, as well as Her Story, which earned a Primetime Emmy nomination and a Gotham Award. Ooh. Welcome, Jen. I really am just... I feel quite emotional watching the film. I wonder if you all have, when was the last time you've seen it, and what was it like for you to see it tonight?
Yeah, it's been a couple years since I saw. I had to step out a few times. It's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of memories. It's a lot of friends. It's a lot of trauma, and having to relive it, and just the sheer amount of media that it's a lot, and also really beautiful, and also really scary to see the backlash that we all kind of knew was coming but didn't expect to be this bad.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. I kept taking very deep breaths up there, just like it's whew. But yeah, it's been, I think, probably a few years for me as well. But, I talk about it all the time. I talk about it. I just haven't watched it in a minute. But it's a lot going on in the movie and also in our everyday life, So to see those things kind of reflected back to us in our everyday while watching it back is quite interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point I stepped out to take a break and I opened TikTok, and the first thing that came up was that the governor of Iowa signing into a bill removing trans people as a protected class, which is the first time in America that a civil right has been withdrawn from a marginalized group. That happened yesterday. So
Yeah. Stacy, what are your initial reactions to seeing the film again?
It had been a while since I'd seen it, and I think it's the first time, because so much time had passed. I mean, it's been like 4 years maybe since I've seen it, that I think I kind of distanced myself being part of the team and just experienced it like a viewer, and it was a different experience. It hit me really hard too. Yeah.
Yeah.
how are you all feeling? I can't see.
Yes. Definitely we'll have a period of question and answer, so we're happy to hear thoughts, feelings, sharings, as well as questions. The sheer amount of images is kind of what I've seen the film multiple times now, and it's like just the sheer amount of them feels kind of daunting, I imagine, as the editor, Stacy. So I wonder if you could talk about your approach to, weaving that narrative with all of those clips, as well as, of course, the powerful stories of the creative consultants.
Yeah. I mean, there was like unlimited. There were so many clips, so many films and shows. So I think sometimes when you're editing a project, your guide, you start with the archival first. Sometimes you start with verite if it's that type of project. And with this, it was the interviews. Absolutely, it was the interviews, and the stories, the personal stories, were the spine of the film. And so the clips were. It was the stories that led to the clips. So things were watched, like the structure. It was began with the interviews.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've never been on a panel with Stacy, so I'm so curious.
Yeah.
How long was the assembly cut?
Well, I would say so. There were sections that were edited first. So like I would work on, I think the very first thing I edited was the Jeffersons. It was the comedy trope, and then I think the Crying Game was the second. And it actually, since the very first cut, hasn't changed that much. I mean, I think that one. So I think it started with many segments, and then and some I think we. Before the first assembly, some might not have even made it into the assembly, but I think the first assembly might have been maybe 3 hours. I can't remember, but yeah, there were a lot of assembled segments that didn't make the final film.
Yeah, and I want to turn to Tre'vell and Jen about, obviously being in front of the camera. Talk to me about when you first got the call to be a part of this film. Was it an immediate, like, yes, I want to be part of this? Was there some hesitancy? And I'll toss to Tre'vell first.
So I write about in my book, We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film, about my time on Disclosure, which is really interesting for me. I was a reporter at the Los Angeles Times at the time, and got this email from the team in which they wanted me to participate. But the main thing of this doc was everybody on screen was a member of the trans community. And at the time, that was not language that I had used for myself. And so I was like, okay, well, what they see? Okay, why are they talking to me? Okay. What they reaching out to me for, And so it jump-started a lot of really interesting introspection for me around my identity, around which language kind of that I felt a home in. And I eventually said yes. Really, because I was like, girl, they asked you to be in a documentary, girl. What you mean? It's a huge yes. But it was... I say in the book that, like, it was one of those moments when you are, like, first called something that you didn't know you were, but you feel it a little bit. And I had been, moving through the world as this, gender non-conforming, non-binary flower, if you will. But just had this really medicalized view of transness. And so I was like, I can't be trans because, we're not interested in all that. And through the process of even just being open to the film, I think it really challenged me to kind of just release my understanding of what a trans experience is from the medicalization that some trans people go through. And I think it really opened up a world of opportunity and language and possibility for me.
Yeah, I love that. Before the film even started, it had this kind of big impact.
Okay.
What about you, Jen? Did you know Sam and Amy before?
Yeah. I'd known Sam for many years, so I was part of the original set of interviews that he was doing in New York, and I guess 14 or somewhere around there. So I was one of, I think he did like 100 interviews at first and just was collecting our stories. And I was friends with Sam, and I just wanted to kind of participate in this oral archive. And at that time, we didn't know where it was going to go or what it was going to be. There was just a real sense of excitement in the community that something was changing and something was happening. So many of those clips brought back like a lot of memories. And there was one clip in there where Laverne was at the Creating Change conference, I think was 2014, and she seems kind of shocked by her reception. And I remember like Janet Mock and I were like there in the front row, and Laverne, like the way that people responded to Laverne and like how packed the house was, we were like, what is this, a Black trans woman? Like, why is everyone so excited? And it like we all felt like something shifting, and it just like one thing after another, and we really felt a real sense of hope and possibility at that time. And there were so many of us who had been working behind the scenes for so long to just try and push things forward a little bit, and then all of a sudden there was this avalanche. And something that's really to Sam's credit is like from that first kind of like tipping point, he's like, okay, but what comes next? Like, what's going to happen after this? Because we've learned that you don't get this visible, particularly this fast, particularly with an identity, that there is such a history of hatred and misunderstanding and willful ignorance without a backlash. So it was always a little fraught and exciting, but absolutely worth it for the impact that the film has had on the lives of us in it and the way that it's reshaped the industry. It's been seismic and worth it.
Yeah. And I want to make space for the reality of the backlash. And I also want to make space for the impact that this film has had. And I know, Jen, in particular, with your career as an actor, you've seen some ripple effects. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, from the film itself, in a lot of ways. So I assume a lot of you here are in the industry in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of what I was doing in the Hollywood for the first few years I was here was just taking what are called generals, where you just sit down with a producer, executive, casting folks, whoever, just kind of get to know each other and figure out like, what we're doing here. What can you offer us? What are we looking for? And I was basically doing a half-hour version of the film just hundreds of times in Hollywood. I would go in and I would work my way in and then meet with them and then tell them like, hey, here's why you need to start casting trans people as trans people. Here's why it's dangerous and wrong to cast cis people as trans people. Here's why you should also have, behind the camera talent, and just making this argument over and over again and disabusing them of all of their misunderstandings and illusions just one by one. It was just long, hard work. I would take auditions for things that were terrible that I would never actually be in so that I could meet the casting director or the director and say like, you can't do this, and here, let me tell you why, and here's how it can be better. And then this came out, and I haven't had to have that conversation since. Like, it does the work for it. Like, everyone in the industry saw this, and it shifted the way they talk. We don't, at least in America now, it's still getting globally, but we don't have cis actors play trans parts anymore. Like, that stopped. Film festivals reached out and said, like, we're no longer programming films where that happens. Like, our sensibility around it completely changed. And then that created a lot more opportunities for those of us. I mean, I did a little 3-episode arc on a show called Clarice, which was a Silence of the Lambs spinoff about the Clarice character that took place in that universe after the events of Silence of the Lambs. And the filmmakers, the creators of the show, and it was like a CBS procedural, like, how do we deal with the legacy of Buffalo Bill and the impact it's had on the trans community, because they had seen Disclosure. Like, this has really hurt people. And so they created a character in that world, like the real world of Clarice and Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill, who had been impacted by all of the media frenzy around Buffalo Bill. And then she actually, my character got to meet Clarice Starling and tell her, like, you messed up my life so bad, and every time I see you, I'm reminded that the world thinks of trans women as monsters because of this one person. So it just has so many ripple effects.
Right. And you were also a writer on that show too.
I started off as a producing consultant in it, and yeah.
Okay. I'm opening We See Each Other because Tre'vell has a really good section here that I would like to ask you to read about the impact of the documentary on Hollywood, kind of further emphasizing what Jen was talking about.
You want me to start here?
Yes, please.
Okay. The documentary has gone on to that part. Just want to make sure.
Keep
Okay.
going.
The documentary has gone on to be a great educational resource for many. Oprah cited it as foundational prep for her interview with Elliot Page after the Oscar-nominated actor came out as trans and non-binary at the end of 2020. Sam Feder, the director, told Vanity Fair in 2021 that CBS's then forthcoming show Clarice, which is based on The Silence of the Lambs, readjusted their production after watching the film, including hiring Jen Richards to both be in the writer's room and act on the show. The quote, the series might have come out and perpetuated the harm that we see in Disclosure, but now that path is completely different, he said. Actor Ryan Reynolds also apparently reached out to Richards and Laverne Cox to say how the film impacted him, and he announced a fellowship. And he announced the fellowship he was developing inspired by the one Disclosure had with its production. Tracy Ellis Ross said on Instagram Live, quote, "I didn't think this would resonate with me, but it completely aligns to how I was impacted by the media, and now I have a different language and framing for it, and I see everything differently now." Halle Berry was offered a role as a trans man in a film, and she walked away not 48 hours after the Disclosure team asked her to watch their film. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how participating in Disclosure gave me the permission I wasn't necessarily asking for at the time to write myself into the archive of trans visibility, to weave my story and lived experiences into that of transcestors known and unknown. I'm reminded of an interview Fatima Jamal did with Amara Jones for the Translash Media short doc, The Future of Trans. What is it that you're trying to create? Amara asks. An archive, Fatima says quite simply with a giggle. An archive of what? An archive of my existence.
And that was just a little preview of March 16th, where we'll be having a book signing of We See Each Other. Tre'vell will be back
Come
here
back and see us.
commentating about Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil with Lady Chablis. So mark your calendars for that. Yeah, I'm wondering about, Stacy, like what the conversations were that you had with Sam and Amy about balancing sort of like these sort of sobering truths about representation at the same time as like the joy of knowing trans people existed. And I'm thinking about, we were talking earlier about the Hitchcock scene with Laverne. And, that's kind of like a moment of levity in the film. So how did you talk about striking that balance between, hard truths and sort of joyful moments?
That's a great question. I think it's like a range of experience. You have experiences with it. It was always good to include moments where someone said, like, yes, this was problematic, but I also got this out of it. I think there was some like nuanced reactions to Boys Don't Cry and nuanced reactions to the show, the Donahues and the Springers, and I think people's experiences are complex, and so I think that was really important to include. And also if there was ever disagreement, or because everyone's having a unique experience, and everyone's growing up in different places at different times and different environments. So, I think the different experiences that people are having. So trying to lean into just the real first time experiences and then maybe revisiting something later was helpful because it's real, And at the same time, it was always really important. We had a lot of conversations, Amy and Sam and I, about the ending and how really understanding that it's not like the work is over and this is a happy ending and yay, we have Pose and we have all, I think there was always a conversation about, how important it is to make it clear that, and it can change on a dime, as Susan Stryker said.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, to move towards the backlash, the primary reason I wanted to create this series is because I thought it was a good movie, just on a basic level. And I also was really moved by, as a programmer, you can only program what exists, right? Like, so there are all these, problematic representations of trans people throughout cinematic history. But there's also this both and, right, as that the film directly addresses. And I guess I wonder, like, what is the value of rereading, which is a term I took from Sam, which I think is like an academic term, but like saying, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil is directed by Clint Eastwood, but it has this trans character who's really complex, fully embodied, and there in whole form. Why is it valuable to claim that?
Well, I don't know. I feel like it's quite a common experience of folks who come from communities that have been like historically excluded to look at a thing and be able to recognize the nuance in it, to be able to say, on one hand, this thing is deeply problematic and caused all of this harm, and then on the other hand, that it was an access point of some sort, right, for us. I think of Marquise in the film talking about, I think Reno was his name on Jerry Springer, right? These are sites that have been and are super harmful to the community. And also, it was an opportunity for people to see slices of possibility. And I think, I think it's a deeply Black thing to do as well, right? To look at a film and be like, ugh. But also, you're laughing out loud at that wildly stereotypical and problematic Black character. And I think what it is it is a defiant effort to claim something different, right? To challenge that which we see on screen and that which we can be in person. And I think it also hopefully opens up something within the non-trans people, right, who get to now view all of these films through trans people's eyes, right, and hopefully they just think differently about the narratives that they're seeing on screen. They think differently about hopefully how they're treating trans people in their everyday life. The rereading is an opportunity for us to claim our places, right, in these archives and in these narratives, when for whatever reason everybody think we dropped onto the face of the earth with Laverne Cox and Orange is the New Black, as if we weren't here, right, as Susan Stryker says, since the beginning of Moving Images.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What really stuck with me this time from the film is you, Jen, your testimony. And to me, you're like kind of like the emotional kind of gooey center of this film. And there's just something about the way that you express yourself, and like the word that comes to me is like countenance. And also, like, if inside I was like, she snapped, like, how the kids will say. It's like Jen snapped in that moment. But I guess I just want to say thank you, for your testimony, because it's really, really impactful and important, and you do it so well. And I guess I just wonder, like, how do you want people to receive what you testified?
A gooey sinner who snaps is my new bio.
Please credit me, thank you.
Please, absolutely. I love that. Shit, I don't know. The thing about making stuff or being in things is you're present to the moment. You're as honest as you can be, as forthcoming as you can be, and then it's beyond you. I have no interest or concern in what happens afterwards. I'm certainly struck. I mean, I still to this day regularly get messages from people, like very heartfelt messages, from particularly from trans people or from moms or parents of trans kids who see the particular unicorn scene and talk about it, or other clips about like the casting or like the way that femininity is weaponized, will get picked back up. Someone will discover it and it goes viral, and it's gratifying to be a part of an ongoing conversation, and knowing that everything that I say in that film is a reflection of all of my community ties. I'm able to talk this way because when I came out, I was kind of adopted by a bunch of, honestly, like trans women of color in Chicago, who were so generous with me and also said, like, now girl, like, you're middle class and white and you have access that we don't. So you've got to return the favor. You've got to be part of things, and so that you can lift us all up. And I've always, that's not a burden, it's a responsibility, and it's a privilege to get to do that. And I've had a very enviable life that is mostly free of a kind of suffering that a lot of my peers have experienced, and that keeps me very grounded and humble, and just I'm grateful to be part of the conversation in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to open it up to y'all, and I'm just going to throw this out there. If you feel comfortable, you could share maybe something that you're taking away from this experience of watching the film. If you have a question, that's welcome as well. But I also want to make space for reflection. If there's something maybe that occurred to you that you didn't think before, or maybe not, but just want to make space for that. Or is the mic going around? Okay, come on down, please. There's a question in the front here.
And please don't be shy, y'all. It's Saturday night. We're in
Yes.
LA. It's rainy. Let's
We don't
bite.
bite.
Let's talk.
Okay.
Hi, I'm kind of nervous. I have a short comment and a short question. The first comment I have is regarding perception. And again, for the longest time, I'm a Gen X gay man, right? For the longest time, the whole Stonewall riots, as far as the narrative, even from the gay community, was that drag queens started the riots. And I believe that until now, where in truth, it actually was the transgender community that did it, right? They're the ones that started, the upheaval and such. So my question is to Jen, tying back to what you said earlier, that testimony towards the end, my heart stopped. And so looking, if you were to look at that now, how can you still expand on that storyline in terms of, like, now it's 4 or 5 years later and here we are? How do you feel about that moment?
The unicorn story, the parents.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I should first of all say my mom and I are closer now than we'd ever been prior to my transition. She's mortified that she said what she had said and done the things she had done. She now forgets I was ever not her daughter. It's just so kind of normal. And looking back, we realized we always had a mother-daughter relationship. So I'm good now. I've also, actually, right when this movie came out, I met my now wife of 4 years, and who does see me the way that father saw his child, and helped me love myself in a different kind of way because someone else really truly saw me and loved me wholly and completely, and that is really transformative. I may be egoist in the movie, but I'm really generally not. So I'm going to just reframe a little bit and go abstract and intellectual with the first part of what you were saying. There's a weird kind of dynamic that happens around, any kind of, cultural insight and commentary, particularly when we're trying to like compensate for previous wrongs. And like Stonewall, the whole like, it's Sylvia and Marcia were like now who are so closely identified with Stonewall. That was very much like an effort by a handful of mostly Black trans women in New York, including Raina Gossett, to kind of put back their place in the larger narrative. But because of the way our culture works now, like those are the only two names associated with it. And it's as if they did Stonewall. And this kind of exceptionalism that we always put, like we want to, hoist up like a couple of individuals and say like, they did it, like that's the face of it. And, or no, it's this person. All is besides the point. Like it was a community. And Stonewall was like one of like 4 riots that had started happening. There was Compton's and Dewey's and Black Cat that preceded Stonewall. And in all these cases, what it was, the people who were out late at night, the people who were partying and bartenders and sex workers and street queens and butches and femmes, a lot of whom didn't have the kind of self-reflective language that we have now. They would not have used the word trans or transgender. They would have seen themselves as gay or as queens or as drag queen. Like it's not really about the language. It's really about the community. And something that I always think about when I think about Stonewall and Compton's and Dewey's and Black Cat is like, we weren't there to riot. Like, historically we think about the riot and the resistance, but like that's because other people interfered with what we were trying to do, which is fucking kiki. Hang out, have coffee, eat pie, catch friends, like see what you're doing, gossip, like celebrate. Like that's what those were really about. It's only when other people tried to take that away that it became violent and like in a movement. But what it's really about, the victory ultimately is getting back to what we were trying to do in the first place, which is just having community, being together with other people in place and loving each other and supporting each other and laughing and gossiping and falling in love and fucking and just enjoying life. That's what it's really about. And so whenever we talk about Stonewall, like I always want to come back to that. Like that's what it's really about. It's just us being together in space, in this world, safe and protected and loving and supporting each other.
Excellent. Does anyone have a question? Yes. Someone there in the middle. Oh, got 2 mics coming to you. Okay.
Hi. Thank you all for creating this film. In reflecting on my own journey, I grew up in Chicago in Boys Town, and like I was always this queer little kid, and I've identified as queer my whole life, but it took me until I was 48 years old to acknowledge my transness. And sometimes I'm like, why? Like, how? I grew up in like this queer environment. Why did it take me so long? And watching this film tonight, it's like that joke that was transness. Like I watched all of those shows, and like I did not want to be that joke. And so like I accepted the identity that was given to me by, society, which was this gay man, and I carried that until I didn't. And like that unicorn thing, and like how you described that, like I never thought that I would be able to look at myself and see the unicorn. And I do today. But it's like, had there been visibility when I was little, it might have been different. So please keep doing what you're doing, because kids really need to see this. So I just wanted to say thank you for making such a beautiful film.
Stacy and I both lived in Andersonville, so
Edgewater was the last place I lived.
Thank you for sharing that. We can go to, yes.
Thank you for making this film. I had a comment and a question. The comment is it was a bit traumatic rewatching some of the media, and some of which I'd like just avoided or not processed, some of which I had processed. But it was a very powerful film. My question is, as public figures, do you have any advice during this backlash on how to protect yourself? And I guess I'm thinking about the juxtaposition of being so vulnerable and so authentic in public, and then having to have a thick skin dealing with the backlash. Thanks.
Yeah. It's a lot going on, y'all. I think one of the things that I say to myself in this moment, I think a lot of folks have been talking about community, getting in touch with a group of folks who believe that we will win and who are interested in helping us get there. And that could look a variety of different ways for you. It could be the folks you're sitting with. It could be, there's fabulous, great organizations with folks who've been organizing long before there were legal documents that recognize their identities, right? Who are, I would say, unfazed by the backlash because they have pushed through and survived so much already. And it's many of those experiences, those people, those narratives, those transcestors whose stories kind of inspire me to keep going, to keep being loud and visible and vocal, and to make sure that the people who say they're my allies, the people who say they are supporting me, are proving it, right? Are also showing up to the screenings and also showing up to the protests and also making sure, right, that I am safe when I'm moving through the world or trying to use the bathroom or whatever. I think it's just really important for us all to find who your community is, and stick with those folks, and to continue to, for me at least, it's about continuing to be as vocal as possible. Because I do think that our visibility, though it has made us as a community more vulnerable, that it is unlocking so much within, those younger folks, right, who don't know what could be possible for them, on the other end. And also for those older folks, right, who also, right, for various different reasons of indoctrination, don't yet know what possibility is out there for them. I'm personally super convinced, in not only our humanity but also our divinity, and I think it's important for us to keep hold to that, in this moment. That's my advice. What's yours?
That was good. Yeah, I agree to all that. The only thing I would add, and I do want to underscore one point that they made, which is, know the history. I mean, like, things were worse when I came out than they are now. It's what we're seeing now is a rollback of the things that we've earned and fought for over the last decade. But like, we didn't have them not that long ago, and we still existed, and we still found each other, and we still thrived. The only other thing I would add is that hope is a practice. It's not something you just like have. Like, we think of it that way, and it's not something that it's easy to do in like good times, but hope is a practice. Like, you have to commit yourself to it. It's a discipline like anything else. I choose to keep having hope, and then allow that hope to then energize my efforts, and like that's what ends up transforming the world. But unless you choose to have that hope, and in the wake of true obstacles, it's meaningless. Like, you have to commit.
I think we could take one last question. Yes, Leslie.
Yes, I had a question. I was just curious, if you're given unlimited resources to produce your own project, what would it be?
I actually will say I have a feature right now that I'm starting to produce that's an indie feature about a girl. She's a senior in high school who's transferred to a new school, and we don't exactly know why, and she's a theater techie. And then she decides to audition for Juliet and gets cast as auditions for Romeo and Juliet and gets cast as Juliet. Falls in love with the boy who plays Romeo, and then you find out that she's trans, and it plays out, what happens because of that. And it puts you, every single scene is from her perspective as a scripted film. And it just puts you in her lived experience and her lived reality. That's what I want to put out in the world right now, because that, 215 million that we discussed earlier in Republican ads, or the 600 bills last year that were proposed specifically to curtail trans rights, and the vast majority of those bills aimed at trans youth. And there is nothing to check all that. Like, the actual lived experience of trans youth in America, their story is not being told. They're just getting vilified and being absolutely drowning underneath the tsunami of just vilifying propaganda. And there's nothing that puts you in their shoes and talks about what their lived experience, like what it's like to be a teenager and just want to like do theater and fall in love and like have a normal experience, and then have your identity be politicized against your will. So that's the movie that I want to make in this current moment right now.
I don't have a movie, but I'm really in a moment of diving into the queer history of historically Black colleges and universities. And so, yes, it could.
I would see that.
Talk to me afterwards. But I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, which, for those of you who don't know, is a historically Black, all-male institution. And I just know that institution's history of queer and trans folks who have helped transform this institution that is so pivotal in Black community and Black American spaces, but that history isn't often uplifted and regarded. And so I'm deeply interested in documenting, what our experiences have been on these campuses, especially in this moment in which, not just Black history, but queer history and other elements of our culture are, at least folks are attempting to erase it and ignore it and disappear it. What does it look like to unearth and shine a light on those folks? That's what I'm interested in. What about you?
Well, I want all the money for the projects I edit, get them to get the money they need. I try to be really particular about what I work on, and so I love when they get the funding they deserve. For personal project, so having been working in documentary for so long and having the privilege as an editor to watch the interviews in the raw and to witness the relationship between the interviewer and the interviewee, I've really been thinking a lot lately about what it means, the relationship between an interviewer and an interviewee, and how transformative it is for both. To be an interviewer, there's something about wearing the earphones if you're monitoring the sound, and holding a mic up, say if you're doing an audio interview or video interview, but just this, it just really puts you in a place of like radical empathy and listening. And a great interviewer for a documentary is not trying to persuade, is not trying to set somebody up, is not trying to educate. They're just there to listen and understand and be curious. And I feel that really has an impact on somebody to be an interviewer. And then I think when you're being interviewed, especially if you're someone who has never been interviewed before, there's something about being seen and heard that I think is really transformative as well. So I have been thinking a lot about that, and about have been working a little bit. I think this is a good time to kind of go back to your hometowns right now. If you come from a smaller hometown, especially, kind of getting out of the bubble and listening to people's stories. So I'm working with some friends and some colleagues about trying to share some of the skills that I've learned in documentary and people I know who do documentary, and teaching people how to interview and having them share, interviewing and getting interviewed. So it's a little project I'm working on.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I know I said that was the last question, but there was one person who you will get the final word. Pass the mic to that person.
Hi, okay. Thank you all for, obviously, the film and staging it for us to see. Thank you all for being here. And I wanted to say thank you for being so thoughtful with your words and what you choose to put out there. I know that selecting the stories out of so many hundreds of hours for the film, you have to distill it down and make it digestible and accessible to people who are not trans or people who don't have the vocabulary, whatever their identity. So thank you. I also want to thank you all for what you're saying tonight, because it feels like we all have a lot that we kind of want to say, and we also all probably, those of us who are trans especially, probably feel like we have to be on good behavior right now. A little bit in certain space, depending on the space, the context. So I just wanted to extend that. Like I just appreciate how you all have communicated tonight. My question is more of a fun one that I wanted to end on.
Yay.
I don't know how many folks here have seen, this film was only current right till 2020, so obviously there's been a lot of media since. I'm sure we could all probably gab about it for hours about what we're watching and love, but in the spirit of the film kind of celebrating good depictions or even lovable problematic depictions, I had a question for the full panel, because it's not just for, trans people, or cis people, which that itself is a binary that I have issues with, but whatever. I wonder if there was a key piece of media, like a character or storyline that you saw growing up, or maybe that felt pivotal because you saw yourself, whether you kind of saw yourself aesthetically, like demographically, or like you were like, that is me. I am seeing me reflected back from like a parallel universe, and how it shifted something in your life. I would just love to hear that from whoever wants to share. Thanks.
I'll go. I'm going to go with him from the Powerpuff Girls. Powerpuff Girls, for those who don't know, is a cartoon. It is a cartoon, and him is a villain, I think, technically, in this series, who has, like, they're red. They're, like, devilish looking, but they have crab claws for hands, and they wear these, like, Lady Gaga type high heels, and they have like a little tutu situation going, and like in the show they like play with their voice in all these different ways, so you get a little masculine, you get a little femme. And I just remember back in the day being like, hey girl, what's going on over here? I just remember being like, I think there's, I don't know, but so that I would go with him. Him would be my character. Changed my life. Okay.
Do we have time still? Yeah, go for it. I'm not going to answer. I'm going to answer a different question you didn't ask, because I thought you were going to go with like, is there anything that's come out since Disclosure that really strikes us? And has anyone seen Chaos on Netflix? It's a series. Really, really brilliant, and they canceled it after one season, as Netflix is wont to do. But there's a storyline where one of the characters is a trans guy who grew up on. He was a child of the Amazons, and in that culture, once boys became men, like when they hit puberty, they had to leave the island, and so this trans guy on the island, in ancient Greece, is considered a girl, but his own mother recognizes in him, like, we all know that's not who you are. Like, you have to leave. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such an interesting twist where, like, they basically foregrounded the reality of its transness. Like, that's the undeniable part, where it's usually, like, cis depictions are the opposite. But this was, like, who you are, like you are a man, like that. Nothing else can change that. You staying here, the world thinking you're a woman, like it's not going to change the reality of who you are. So you have to leave. So like, I have to like lose my child. You have to like leave this community because the reality of who you are is undeniable. And that kind of narrative approach to transness is not one I'd seen on film before, where you were questioning or trying to advocate for the reality of trans. It was just a given that you have to navigate, and that's the kind of step forward in narrative that I'm most excited about.
All right. Well, I'll then take both of your ways of responding. So Yoda, actually, I had a period. I had a Yoda phase where I would after a rain, particularly, there was a particular puddle that would accumulate under the swing set, and I would sit and stir the mud and pretend to be Yoda. So there was a Yoda. I also really wanted to be Annie, but that's another. In terms of what what's on, like I would say what I want to see and what has started. Her books are starting to be adapted, but I'm really looking forward to all of Octavia Butler's films being made into films and possibly series. But I find that Octavia Butler, more than anyone else I've ever read, for better or for worse, offers guidance for me, but also feels very frightening sometimes. I highly recommend reading if you haven't.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end than with Octavia. So thank you all so much for coming. And have a good night.